He hit her in front of everyone. One open-handed blow across the face, loud enough to silence an entire hangar, and not a single person moved. Not the officers, not the enlisted men, not the civilians standing along the far wall. They all just watched. Petty Officer First Class Maya Callahan did not cry. She did not stumble. She simply stood there, her long dark hair falling across her face, her hand resting on the collar of Rex, her German shepherd, and she looked at the man who had just struck her with the calmest, most terrifying eyes anyone in that room had ever seen. And then Rex began to growl. "Welcome to the channel. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now and drop the name of your city in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now stay with me, because what happens next will leave you breathless." Master Chief Leon Burrows had been running Naval Special Operations Support Group 7 like his own personal kingdom for 11 years, and nobody had ever successfully challenged him. He was a broad man, thick through the chest and neck, with a voice that had been sharpened by a decade of drilling recruits into submission. He walked the corridors of the facility at Naval Air Station Coronado like the floor had been installed specifically for him, and he treated every junior service member accordingly. When Petty Officer First Class Maya Callahan arrived on a temporary duty assignment 3 weeks prior, Burrows had made up his mind about her in the first 30 seconds. She was 22 years old. Small, framed with long dark brown hair, she wore loose despite the regulations that left that detail to the commanding officer's discretion. She wore a white deep-neck sports bra under her open uniform blouse and military camouflage pants that had clearly seen real field use, the knees worn pale from actual dirt, and kneeling, not from decorative distressing. She walked beside 2 German shepherds, Rex and Shadow, both of them moving with a fluid, purposeful stillness that was almost unsettling in animals so large. "You're the K9 handler they sent me," Burrows had said that first morning, looking her up and down the way a man does when he has already decided the answer before asking the question. "Petty Officer First Class Callahan, Master Chief." "Yes, sir." "You look like you should be in college." "I was," she said without missing a beat. "I left." That answer had irritated him. Not the fact of it, but the tone. Flat, unbothered, as if his observation carried no weight whatsoever. He had spent the next 3 weeks attempting to correct that tone, and she had spent 3 weeks refusing to let him. She was attached to the group for a classified threat assessment operation. Her orders routed through a command designation that Burrows had tried twice to look up and been denied access both times. He told himself that was a clerical error. He told himself a lot of things. What he knew was this: she showed up every morning before anyone else. She ran her dogs through their assessments in silence while the rest of the unit was still drinking their first coffee. She sat through his briefings without writing a single note, and when he tested her on the material afterward, she recalled it with a precision that made his senior lieutenants visibly uncomfortable. She never argued. She never complained. She completed every task he assigned her, including the ones he designed specifically to be beneath her classification level, with the same careful, unhurried attention she brought to everything else. It made him furious in a way he could not entirely explain. He had started calling her the dog girl in front of the others, and a few of the weaker ones laughed because they were afraid not to. She never reacted. She just looked at him once briefly, and then looked back at whatever she had been doing, and that one look had stayed with him at night more than he wanted to admit. 3 weeks and the call came. A credible threat package had been flagged by naval intelligence, a potential infiltration attempt, targeting the installation's secondary fuel depot. The threat profile was sophisticated, the kind of thing that moved through walls and perimeters rather than crashing through them. The assessment team needed a sweep of the entire eastern quarter of the base within a 2-hour window before a scheduled fuel transfer that could not be postponed. Burrows assembled his senior personnel in the main operations hangar. He stood at the center of the space, all 40 feet of it, buzzing with the low, urgent energy of people who understood the stakes, and he laid out the plan. It was not a good plan. Commander Heather Solis, his executive officer, recognized that within the first 4 minutes, her eyes tracking the route map on the center table with a growing furrow between her brows. She said nothing yet because Burrows had a habit of interpreting early questions as personal challenges, Maya stood at the edge of the assembled group, Rex pressed against her left leg, Shadow on her right. She listened. She did not look at the map. She did not need to. She had already walked every inch of the eastern quarter during her morning assessments, and she had already identified 3 critical errors in what Burroughs was proposing. He finished speaking and looked around the room with the satisfied expression of a man expecting applause. Any questions? Solis drew a slow breath. Master Chief, the sweep pattern on grid 7 through 9 puts the second team in a convergence blind spot. If there's any coordinated movement on the eastern fence line, they won't have a line of communication until they're already past the point of... I didn't ask for a tactical critique, Commander. I asked for questions. Solis closed her mouth. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing more. The silence that followed had a particular texture, the kind that meant everyone in the room had the same thought, and no one was willing to say it out loud. Then Maya spoke. The dogs won't work that pattern. Every head in the room turned. Burroughs turned last slowly, like a man who wanted to demonstrate that he was choosing to give her his attention rather than being commanded to. Excuse me? Rex and Shadow are tracking dogs, Master Chief, not patrol dogs. If you run them through grid 7 with a convergence blind spot at the fence line, they're going to alert on the wrong vector, and you're going to lose 20 minutes repositioning. She paused. You don't have 20 minutes. The silence in the room changed texture again. It became something heavier. Burroughs walked toward her. He was not a man who stood close to people to have conversations. He was a man who stood close to people to remind them of his size, and he did it now, stopping 2 feet from her, close enough that several of the junior personnel shifted their weight uncomfortably. Did I ask for your input, Petty Officer? No, Master Chief. Then keep your mouth shut and your dogs on their leashes. Rex's head dropped half an inch, his amber eyes fixing on Burroughs with an attention that was not aggressive, but was not entirely comfortable either. Maya's hand rested lightly on his collar, not restraining, just present. The pattern needs adjustment on grid 9, she said. Her voice had not changed. I can walk you through the correction in under 3 minutes. The sound that came out of Burroughs at that moment was not quite a laugh, and not quite a word. It was the sound a man makes when he has decided to stop pretending. You've been here 3 weeks, little girl. I've been running operations out of this facility since before you were learning to read. You want to talk to me about pattern adjustments. You want to stand in front of my team and tell me how to run my own sweep. Yes, she said simply. She could not have chosen a worse answer. He stepped closer. His voice dropped, which was somehow worse than when he was shouting. You think those dogs make you special. You think whatever classified little errand you got sent here to run gives you the right to stand in my hangar and contradict me in front of my people. I think 23 personnel are about to run a compromised sweep pattern on a credible threat target, she said, and I think you know it. Every person in that hangar felt the air change. Burroughs' expression went through 3 distinct transformations in rapid succession. The first was outrage. The second was something colder. The third was decision. Get out, he said. Get your dogs and get out of my briefing. And when this operation is complete, I'm going to have a very detailed conversation with whatever command was stupid enough to send you here. Maya looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at Commander Solis, whose face had gone carefully blank in the particular way of someone watching a traffic accident in slow motion. She bent and touched Rex once behind his right ear. She straightened. She began to walk toward the side exit of the hangar. She had taken 4 steps when Burroughs spoke again, loud enough for every person in that building to hear clearly. That's right. Go find something you're actually qualified for. Maybe fetch us some coffee. She stopped. She did not turn around. She just stopped. And in that stillness, Rex stopped too, and both dogs' heads came up at precisely the same moment, orienting toward Burroughs, with a focus that made 2 of the junior personnel take a visible step backward. Commander Solis said very quietly, Master Chief, I said what I said. Maya turned around. Her dark brown hair shifted across her shoulder. She looked at Burroughs with an expression that several people in that room would later describe in their depositions as the most controlled thing they had ever seen on a human face. "You want to correct me," she said. "Fine, but you're going to lose people on that fence line." Burroughs crossed the hangar in 8 steps. Later, the witnesses would agree that what happened next took less than 3 seconds from the moment he moved to the moment it was over. He raised his hand and brought it down across the side of her face. Open-palmed, hard, sharp enough that the sound of it hit the metal walls of the hangar and came back. Her head turned with the force of it. Her hair flew across her face, and the hangar became so quiet that you could hear the low, continuous building growl that was coming from Rex. Not a bark, not a lunge. A growl that started low in his chest and climbed slowly, steadily like pressure building behind a sealed door. Shadow joined it a half-second later. Maya reached up slowly and moved her hair out of her face. There was a redness spreading across her cheekbone. She did not touch it. She did not look at it. She looked at Burroughs with those same calm, dark eyes, and then she did something no one in the room expected. She reached into the left chest pocket of her open blouse, and she removed a small black device, no larger than a thumb drive, and she pressed a single button on its surface. Somewhere on the other side of the base, something began to happen. Burroughs stared at the device. "What is that?" "You should step back from me," she said quietly. "Not because of me, because of them." Rex had stopped growling, which was somehow much worse. The device in Maya's hand was the size of a thumb drive, and it had taken her less than 2 seconds to activate it. Nobody in that hangar knew what it was. Nobody knew what it did. But every single person in the room felt in the space between one heartbeat and the next that something had fundamentally shifted. Burroughs stared at it. His face was still flushed, still carrying the heat of what he had just done. But something underneath that heat had started to cool very quickly. "I asked you a question, petty officer. What is that device?" "A notification," she said. "A notification to who?" She did not answer. She simply slid the device back into her chest pocket and buttoned it closed, and the economy of that movement, the total absence of fear in it, was more unsettling to the people watching than anything else that had happened in the last 60 seconds. Commander Solis stepped forward. Her voice was low and tightly controlled. "Master Chief, I need to formally advise you that what just occurred constitutes a reportable incident under UCMJ Article 128, and I am obligated to." "I know what it constitutes, Commander." "Then you understand that I cannot allow this briefing to continue without. The briefing is over." Burroughs turned away from both of them and faced the room. His voice had recovered some of its authority, the practiced boom of a man who had used volume as armor for so long he barely knew he was doing it. "Teams Alpha and Bravo, you have your assignments. Gear up and move out in 40. Dismissed." Nobody moved. That was the thing that should have told him everything. 40 uniformed personnel, half of them with combat deployments, and not one of them moved toward the exit. They stood there looking at him, and then looking at Maya, and then looking at the 2 German shepherds who had not made a sound in over a minute, but whose attention had not moved from Burroughs since the moment his hand had come down. Rex was not growling anymore. He was simply watching both amber eyes tracking the Master Chief with a patience that had no bottom to it. Shadow had moved very slightly 1 step to the left, positioning herself at Maya's other flank without any visible command from her handler. Lieutenant Commander David Park, the senior intelligence officer attached to the group, spoke from the left side of the room. His voice was careful. "Petty Officer Callahan, are you all right?" "Yes, sir." "Do you require medical attention?" "No, sir." Park looked at Burroughs. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. Burroughs pointed at him. "Park, you want to say something to me, you say it directly." Park held his gaze. "I think you may want to contact JAG before the next 40 minutes are up, Master Chief. That is all I am going to say directly." The first sign that something had changed outside the hangar came without announcement. A sound distant at first that did not belong to the ordinary rhythm of the base. It was not an alarm in the traditional sense. It was not the rising wail of an air raid siren or the sharp burst of an emergency klaxon. It was something lower, something that seemed to bypass the ears entirely, and make itself known through the sternum, a sustained resonant tone that nobody present had ever heard before in their service careers. 3 of the junior personnel looked up at the ceiling instinctively, as if the sound were coming from above them. It was coming from everywhere. Sergeant First Class Anthony Greer, one of the group's most experienced tactical coordinators, had been in the military for 26 years. He had heard every alarm, every drill tone, every emergency signal that the Department of Defense had developed in the last 3 decades. He turned to the man beside him and said very quietly, "I don't know what that is." The man beside him said nothing because he didn't know either. Then every screen in the hangar went black, not a flicker, not a fade. Black, instantaneous, as if the power behind them had been cut at a level far deeper than the circuit breakers. Every monitor, every tactical display, every tablet screen that anyone was holding, all of it gone. And then the screens came back on, every single one of them simultaneously showing the same thing. White text on a black background, 4 words, no punctuation, no explanation. Directive 7. Stand down. Burroughs stared at the nearest screen. His face had gone a color that Commander Solis would later describe as the shade of old concrete. "What is Directive 7?" he said. Nobody answered him because nobody in that hangar knew. Maya knew. She did not say anything. She stood with her hand resting on Rex's head, her posture unchanged, her expression unchanged, and she waited. The way people wait when they already know exactly what is coming and have simply decided to let it arrive. The hangar's main doors, the reinforced sliding panels that required a motorized track system to move, began to open from the outside. Not at the speed of normal operation, faster, as if whoever had activated them had overridden the safety limiters entirely. Through the gap came 8 people in tactical gear that none of the unit's personnel recognized. Matte black, no unit insignia, no visible rank. Markings weapons held at a precise low ready that spoke of a training standard above and beyond anything available to standard special operations units. They moved into the hangar in a pattern that covered every exit point within 6 seconds of entry, and then they stopped. They did not speak. They did not address anyone. They oriented themselves facing outward, forming a loose perimeter, and at the center of that perimeter, unmistakably, was Maya Callahan and her 2 dogs. Burroughs took a step forward. "Who are you people? This is a restricted—" The tallest of the tactical personnel turned his head toward Burroughs. He did not raise his weapon. He did not speak. He simply looked at him, and there was something in that look that stopped the Master Chief mid-sentence as effectively as a physical wall. Greer took hold of Burroughs' arm from behind. "Leon," he said very quietly, using his first name for the first time in 11 years. "Stop." Burroughs shook him off. "This is my facility. I am not going to stand here while—" "Leon!" Greer's grip came back firmer. "Look at the door." The second set of footsteps announced themselves before the figures appeared. Different from the tactical team. Measured, deliberate, the sound of people who were not in a hurry because they had never needed to be in a hurry in their lives, because the world arranged itself around their schedule rather than the other way around. 3 people came through the main hangar doors. The first was a woman in her late 50s, with close-cropped silver hair, and the kind of posture that suggested she had not permitted herself to slouch once in the last 30 years. She wore 4 stars on her collar. Vice Admiral Catherine Reyes, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, a woman whose name appeared in congressional testimony more often than most senators. The second was a man built like a retired fullback who had somehow never stopped training. His dark face set in an expression of absolute controlled neutrality. 4 stars. Admiral Jerome Webb, commander of United States Fleet Forces Command. The third walked at the center, and the moment he crossed the threshold, the entire atmospheric pressure of the hangar seemed to change. Admiral Thomas Graydon, Chief of Naval Operations, the highest uniformed officer in the United States Navy. A man who briefed the president. 3 4-star admirals. On a base that had never once in its operational history been visited by more than 1 flag officer at a time. The junior personnel did not just freeze. Several of them seemed to stop breathing entirely. Burroughs's mouth opened. It stayed open. No sound came out. Admiral Reyes did not look at him. None of them looked at him. All three walked directly and without hesitation through the perimeter of the tactical team and stopped in front of Maya Callahan. Admiral Webb spoke first, his voice carrying the effortless authority of someone who had spent 40 years learning exactly how much force was required to make a point and never using more than that. Petty Officer Callahan, status report. Maya straightened. Not a dramatic snap to attention, just a precise, natural alignment. Operationally intact, Admiral. The dogs are uncompromised. My primary equipment is functional. You activated the 7 protocol. Yes, sir. Walk me through it. She did briefly, with no wasted words. The briefing, the sweep pattern, the intervention, the strike. She delivered it the way she delivered everything factually, without editorial, with a clarity that somehow made it more damning than any emotional account could have been. Reyes listened with her eyes on the far wall, her arms loose at her sides. When Maya finished, the Admiral said, "The mark on your face, that came from Burroughs." "Yes, Admiral." "You did not report it immediately. I activated the protocol instead, Admiral. The threat to the fuel depot was still active. I assessed that as the higher priority." Reyes finally turned and looked at her, and what was on her face was not pity and was not anger. It was something more complex and more permanent than either of those things. Admiral Graydon, the CNO, had not spoken yet. He walked to the center table where Burroughs' sweep plan was still displayed on the one tactical screen that the blackout had not affected, and looked at it for a long moment. He tilted his head slightly. "This plan has 3 critical exposures," he said to no one in particular. "Grid 7 convergence, the blind channel on the eastern fence, and an approach vector that puts Team Bravo in a position where their comms would drop for 4 minutes minimum." He paused. "Callahan identified these?" "Yes, sir," Solis said from across the room, her voice steady despite the visible tension in every line of her body. "She attempted to report them during the briefing, and was prevented from doing so." "Yes, sir." Graydon turned around. He looked at Burroughs for the first time. Master Chief Leon Burroughs had commanded rooms for 11 years. He had never once in those 11 years been the smallest person present. He was not the smallest person present now in terms of physical size. But he felt it. He felt it in the way you feel it when you understand with a completeness that leaves no room for revision that you have made an error so profound and so final that the life you had before it no longer exists. "You struck her," Graydon said. It was not a question. "Admiral, Burroughs stopped. He tried again. "The situation had escalated to a point where I felt that you struck a petty officer first class during an active threat briefing." Graydon's voice had not risen. It had, if anything, gotten quieter, and that quietness was more devastating than any volume. "In front of 40 of your subordinates. Because she identified errors in your operational plan. She was insubordinate, Admiral. She challenged my command authority in front of the—" "She was correct," Graydon said. The 2 words hit the room like something physical. "The plan was flawed. The identification was accurate. And your response to being corrected by someone you outranked was to strike her." He paused, and every second of that pause was deliberate. "Tell me, Master Chief, how long have you been in the United States Navy?" 28 years, Admiral. 28 years. Graydon repeated it slowly, as if he were weighing it. "And in 28 years of service, was there a single day, a single training, a single moment in which you were taught that the appropriate response to a tactical correction was a physical assault on the person delivering it?" Burroughs said nothing. "Or did you simply decide," Graydon continued, "that because she was 22 years old and came to this facility with dogs instead of a rank insignia, you could immediately recognize she wasn't worth listening to?" Still nothing. It was Rex who moved first. A slow, deliberate shift of his body pressing closer against Maya's left leg. His big head turning to look up at her face with an attention that was almost human in its concern. She looked down at him just briefly, and something passed between them that was too quiet and too old to have a name. Admiral Reyes stepped forward then. She reached into her jacket and removed a sealed document pouch which she handed to Commander Solis without looking away from Burroughs. "That is Petty Officer Callahan's service record," she said. "The unredacted version. You are going to read the summary page, out loud, to this room." Solis opened the pouch. Her hands were steady. Her eyes moved across the first page, and then she stopped, and in the silence that followed her stopping 3 different people near her, leaned in involuntarily, trying to see what she was reading. She looked up. She looked at Maya. She looked back down at the page. "Out loud, Commander," Reyes said. Solis cleared her throat. What she read next changed the air in that hangar permanently. Commander Solis read from the page the way a person reads something they are not entirely certain is real, with pauses between phrases that were not dramatic choices, but genuine moments of recalibration. "Primary designation," she began. "K-9 Tactical Intelligence Unit Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Secondary designation classified. Operational deployments 14. Combat engagements 11. Confirmed threat neutralizations via K-9 interdiction classified. Awards." She paused again. "Navy Cross. Defense Intelligence Medal. Presidential Unit Citation. Joint Special Operations Command Commendation, awarded twice." Another pause, longer this time. "And below that." She looked up at the room, then back down. "Special designation. Principal Handler Project Shepherd. Authorization Tier Omega level." The room absorbed that in complete silence. Lieutenant Commander Park, the intelligence officer who had been careful with his words since the moment the admirals walked in, was no longer careful. "Omega Tier," he said aloud, not to anyone specifically, just to the air. "That's not a real designation. That's a designation from the classified annex of the Special Access Program Registry. That means her authorization level is above—" He stopped himself. He looked at Admiral Reyes. "That means her authorization level is above mine, significantly above yours." Reyes confirmed. Park looked at Maya. Maya looked back at him with the same expression she had worn for the last 40 minutes, which was to say, no particular expression at all, just a steady, dark-eyed attention that gave nothing away and missed nothing. Burroughs had not moved. He had not spoken since the CNO's last question had hung unanswered in the air between them. He stood in the spot where the weight of everything had landed on him, and he simply stayed there as if moving might make it worse, as if stillness were the last form of control available to him. It wasn't. Admiral Graydon turned back to Burroughs with the measured deliberateness of a man completing an unpleasant task that he had known from the moment he walked into the building would need to be done. "Project Shepherd," he said, "is a joint naval intelligence and JSOC program that has been operational for 6 years. It is the single most effective non-electronic perimeter and threat detection system the Department of Defense has ever developed. In the last 4 years alone, it has intercepted 14 infiltration attempts on Tier 1 installations, prevented 2 coordinated attacks on naval assets abroad, and generated threat intelligence that directly informed 3 separate counterterrorism operations." He paused. "The program exists because of her. She built it. She trained every dog in it. She wrote the handling protocols. She designed the alert architecture." Petty Officer First Class Maya Callahan. "The woman you ordered to fetch coffee is the reason Project Shepherd functions at all." The junior personnel were not breathing. You could feel it in the room, that particular collective stillness of people who understand they are inside a moment that will not happen again, a moment they will describe to people for the rest of their lives and never fully be believed. Sergeant First Class Greer, 26 years, and the man who had quietly tried to stop Burroughs before it was too late, sat down on the nearest equipment case and put his hands on his knees and stared at the floor. Rex chose that moment to walk forward, not toward the admirals, not toward Burroughs. He walked to Commander Solis, who was still holding the open document pouch, and he sat in front of her and looked up at her face with calm amber patience. Solis looked down at him. Something shifted in her expression, something personal and unguarded for just a moment, and she reached out and touched the top of his broad head before she fully decided to do it. "Good dog," she said quietly. It was such a human moment inside all that institutional gravity that two people nearby had to look away. Maya watched it and said nothing. But for the first time since Burroughs's hand had come down across her face, the set of her mouth changed very slightly. Not quite a smile. Something quieter than that. Admiral Webb spoke. He had been largely silent since his initial exchange with Maya, and his silence had carried its own particular weight in the room. "Master Chief Burroughs." His voice was not the controlled neutrality it had been earlier. It was something harder now, something that had found its edge. "I am going to tell you what is about to happen, and I am going to tell you once." Burroughs turned to face him. "You are going to be escorted from this facility within the next 15 minutes. Your security clearance is suspended effective immediately, which means you cannot access any classified system, any restricted space, or any personnel file on this installation from this moment forward. A formal investigation under Article 128 will be initiated by JAG before end of business today. Given the nature of the individual you assaulted and the operational context in which the assault occurred, the investigation will be conducted at the highest classification level, and you will not be informed of its progress. You will retain counsel. You will say nothing to anyone about what occurred in this hangar today, and you will understand that the non-disclosure obligations attached to this facility apply to every detail of this incident without exception." Webb paused. "Do you understand what I have just told you?" "Yes, Admiral," Burroughs said. His voice had gone flat in a way that was worse than anger. It was the voice of a man watching the last door close. "Then you are dismissed." Nobody moved to escort him. Nobody had to. Burroughs walked toward the side exit of the hangar with the gait of a man carrying something he could not put down, something that had no name but weighed everything. He did not look at Maya as he passed. He did not look at anyone. The side door opened and then closed, and the sound of it was very final. The tactical team remained in position. Admiral Reyes turned to the assembled unit personnel. She took them in with a single comprehensive look, the look of someone conducting a rapid and accurate assessment of the human material in front of her. "The threat package on the eastern sector is still active," she said, as if the last 20 minutes had been a brief administrative pause. "Petty Officer Callahan, I want your revised sweep recommendation on grid 7 through 9. You have 5 minutes. "Yes, Admiral." Maya moved to the center table. She did not hesitate. She did not need the maps on the screen, but she pulled them up anyway because the people around her needed to see what she saw. She began to talk, and her voice in that mode, the operational mode, was different from her silence, and different from her single flat responses to Burroughs. It was precise and fast and textured, with a certainty that was not arrogance, but was something she had earned the hard way in 14 deployments, in 11 combat engagements, in years of working with animals whose value to national security she had argued for, in rooms where no one wanted to listen. The pattern Burroughs had in place puts Team Bravo into a 4-minute communication dead zone on the eastern fence approach, she said, tracing the route with her finger. Any coordinated movement from the north perimeter during that window hits them before they can call it in. You need to collapse the grid 7 approach by 200 meters and offset the Bravo entry point to here. She tapped the screen. That gives them line of sight to the secondary relay and maintains comm continuity through the entire sweep. Park leaned in beside her, studying the adjustment. That also covers the approach vector that the Burroughs plan left open. Yes. How did you identify that the original plan used classified topographic overlays? She looked at him briefly. I walked the sector at 0430 this morning. Both dogs alerted on the northern fence approach during the standard assessment. I flagged it in my personal log and intended to raise it in the briefing. Park straightened. He looked at Admiral Reyes. She walked a pre-operational threat identification sweep before the briefing that identified the exact vulnerability the threat package flagged. I know, Reyes said. Park absorbed that. How long have you known? Long enough, Reyes said, and did not elaborate. The operation went out 45 minutes later. Not Burroughs's plan. Maya's. Team Bravo went in on the adjusted vector, Rex and Shadow working the eastern fence approach with the particular focused intensity that the dogs only showed when the scent they were trained on was genuinely present. 40 minutes into the sweep, at the exact approach vector Maya had identified that morning, Rex stopped. He did not bark. He sat. That was the alert. That was what 6 years of Project Shepherd had built. A dog that could walk into a space process 1,000 inputs that no electronic sensor had been designed to catch and communicate a threat assessment with one deliberate movement. Rex sat and Shadow flanked left, and Maya keyed her radio and said 4 words. Contact, Grid 9 North. The response team moved in. What they found at the Grid 9 North approach was not a dramatic confrontation. It was 3 pieces of equipment carefully concealed designed to map the base's internal sensor network and broadcast it to an external receiver. Sophisticated, patient, the kind of threat that does not announce itself, that works slowly and invisibly and would have gone entirely undetected if the sweep had run Burroughs's original pattern. In the Situation Room, on the other side of the installation, Admiral Graydon received the report and stood very still for a moment before he said anything. She found it. Rex found it, sir. The communications officer replied. Same thing, Graydon said. Back at the recovery point, Maya crouched beside Rex and held his big face in both hands. His tail moved slowly, deliberately, the way it did after a successful alert. She pressed her forehead against his for a moment, briefly privately, the way people are only truly themselves with animals, because animals require no performance. Good boy, she said. That's my good boy. Shadow pressed in from the left, demanding acknowledgement, and Maya laughed quietly, just one breath of it, and scratched behind both Shadow's ears with her free hand. Lieutenant Commander Park was watching from 6 feet away. He had been in naval intelligence for 12 years. He had seen classified systems, classified personnel, classified programs that had redefined his understanding of what was operationally possible. He watched a 22-year-old woman with her dogs in the dirt at a Grid 9 recovery point, and he thought with a clarity that surprised him that he had never in his career seen anything that looked more like the actual center of things. His radio crackled. Admiral Reyes's voice. Park. Status. Threat package neutralized, Admiral. All clear on Eastern Sector. A pause. And Callahan. Park looked at her again. She was standing now, Rex and Shadow, flanking her in their natural positions, her dark hair shifting in the wind off the water, her hand resting on Rex's head. She's fine, Admiral, he said. She was always fine. Another pause, shorter. Tell her the CNO wants a debrief at 1800. Full Shepherd team. Park walked over and relayed the message. Maya nodded. Tell the Admiral yes, sir. You don't have to say sir for a message relayed through me. I know, she said. I say it anyway. Park stood beside her for a moment. He was not a man given to unnecessary conversation, which was probably why what came out of him next surprised him as much as it surprised her. I've been on this base for 8 months, he said. I walked past you twice in the corridor last week, and I didn't know who you were. She looked at him. 3 senior intelligence officers on this installation, and not one of us knew who we were walking past. He paused. I just want to say that I'm sorry for that. Maya was quiet for a moment. Rex leaned against her leg. You didn't know, she said. That's the whole point of how it works. That doesn't make it right. She looked at him for another moment, and something in her expression shifted again. That same quality that was not quite a smile, but lived in the same neighborhood. No, she said. It doesn't. It was Shadow who ended the conversation, pressing her nose firmly into the back of Park's hand, with the blunt democratic affection of a dog who had decided a person was acceptable. Park looked down at her startled, and then he did something that was probably not standard naval intelligence protocol. He scratched behind her ears. And Shadow, who had just helped identify and locate a sophisticated intelligence-gathering apparatus designed to compromise a Tier 1 installation, wagged her tail. The debrief at 1800 was not held in the standard conference room. It was held in a space that most of the personnel on base did not know existed, a room 3 levels below the main operations building, accessible only through a corridor that required 2 separate biometric confirmations and an escort with Omega-level clearance. Park had been on base for 8 months and had never been through that corridor. He went through it now, walking 2 steps behind Maya Callahan and her dogs, which told him everything he needed to know about the reordering that had taken place that afternoon. The room held 6 people: Admiral Graydon, Admiral Reyes, Admiral Webb, Lieutenant Commander Park, Commander Solis, and Maya. Rex and Shadow settled under the table beside Maya's chair with the practiced ease of animals who had attended many meetings in many secure rooms and found all of them equally unremarkable. Graydon opened without preamble. The equipment recovered at Grid 9 North has been preliminarily identified as a 3rd-generation passive sensor array, origin unknown, designed to map and record internal network traffic patterns without active transmission. It would have completed its collection cycle in approximately 72 hours and then gone dark on its own. He paused. If it had completed that cycle, whoever placed it would have had a detailed blueprint of every electronic system on this installation. Every comm channel, every patrol frequency, every classified network node. The silence that followed had weight. Rex's alert prevented that, Reyes said. Not a question. A statement she was making sure was in the room. Yes, Admiral, Maya said. Talk me through the alert signature. I want the full read. Maya described it the way she described everything, with a precision that was not cold, but was intensely focused, the way a musician talks about sound. Rex had begun tracking the anomalous scent compound at approximately the 200-meter mark on the northern approach. The compound was not an explosive and not a biological agent. It was a specific chemical signature associated with the polymer casing used in that class of surveillance equipment, a signature she had trained Rex to identify 18 months ago, after Project Shepard's intelligence analysts had flagged it as an emerging threat profile. You trained him on that specific compound, Park said. On 12 variants of it, she said. The casing composition changes slightly depending on manufacturing batch. Rex can distinguish between 8 of the 12 variants and alert on any of them. Park sat with that for a moment. You built that into the program 18 months ago based on a projected threat profile. Yes, before anyone on this base knew that profile existed. The intelligence was classified at a level above this installation's access tier at the time, she said. The training decision was made at the program level. Reyes was watching her steadily. It was your decision. Yes, Admiral. Graydon leaned forward. Petty Officer Callahan, I want to ask you something directly, and I want a direct answer. He waited until she looked at him. In your assessment, based on what Rex found today, and the intelligence picture you have access to at your clearance level, is this installation currently secure? The question landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Maya did not answer immediately, which was itself an answer of a kind. She looked at the table for a moment, and Rex, who was lying under it, shifted and put his chin on her boot. She felt the weight of it. No, she said. Not entirely. Nobody moved. The array at Grid 9 was one piece, she continued. The placement was too deliberate, the location too precisely chosen for someone who didn't already have partial knowledge of this installation's patrol patterns. Whoever put it there knew enough to avoid the primary sensor coverage. That means they either have a source inside a previous collection that we haven't identified, or both. Graydon looked at Reyes. The look that passed between them was brief and communicated a great deal. You believe there's a second collection point, Reyes said. I believe there may be. Rex and Shadow didn't complete the full Western Sector sweep before the operation was called. The Burrows pattern had them starting on the eastern approach, which meant the western perimeter was never walked today. Why didn't you flag that at the recovery point? I flagged it in my report, Admiral, filed at 1712. Park pulled out his tablet, checked it, and looked up. The report is in the system. Filed at 1712. I didn't see it because I wasn't cleared to her reporting channel. Solis pressed her eyes closed briefly. So we have a potentially incomplete sweep on an active threat assessment. Yes, Commander, Maya said. Graydon stood up. The room stood with him, all of them reflexively, the way people respond to a man whose gravity they have absorbed without being entirely aware of it. Reyes, get a team on the western perimeter now. Full spectrum sweep, use Callahan's pattern, not Burroughs. He was already moving. I want confirmation within 2 hours. Yes, sir. Callahan. He stopped at the door and turned. Can you run another sweep tonight? Both dogs. Yes, Admiral. Then we go back out at 2000. You lead, Park goes with you as tactical support. He looked at Park. You take your direction from her. Park straightened. Yes, sir. It was 1847 when Maya walked out of the subterranean debrief room and back into the corridor. Park fell into step beside her. Rex moved to his natural position on her left. Shadow took the right. You doing all right? Park asked. It was the kind of question that required a moment to answer honestly, and she gave it that moment. The redness on her cheekbone had deepened to a bruise over the course of the afternoon, high on the bone, precise in its shape. She had not looked at it, and had not asked for ice, and the Navy physician, who had attempted to assess her at 1630, had been politely and firmly declined. I'm fine, she said. That's not what I asked. She looked at him sideways, a brief assessing look. I've had worse. That's also not what I asked. She was quiet for a few steps. What did you ask? I asked how you're doing, not physically, not operationally. Rex pressed against her leg briefly, just a half second of contact, and she reached down without breaking stride and touched his head. I'm doing what I always do, she said. I'm working. Park accepted that. He didn't push it, which she noted. The western perimeter sweep at 2000 found the second array. It was not at the location Maya had predicted, but it was in the sector she had flagged 40 meters south of her projected point, placed with the same deliberate precision as the first. Rex found it in 11 minutes. He sat. Shadow flanked. Maya called it in, and this time there were 6 people waiting at the recovery point who had been briefed on the alert signature and knew exactly what they were looking at when the equipment was extracted from its concealment. Park stood beside her during the recovery and said nothing for a long time. When he finally spoke, it was quiet enough that only she could hear it. 2 arrays, both in locations that required prior knowledge of our patrol patterns. Yes. That means someone talked, or someone was watched very carefully for a very long time, she said. It doesn't have to be an active source. It could be pattern analysis, long-term observation, the kind of collection that looks like nothing until it's complete. Park thought about that. You're telling me we may have been studied from the outside. I'm telling you that the placement of both arrays is consistent with someone who understood our coverage gaps from direct observation over time. That's a different threat profile from an insider. Which is worse? She looked at him. They're both bad, she said. Just differently. At 2140, they were back inside. Admiral Reyes met them in the corridor outside the operations center, which meant she had been waiting, which meant the situation had developed. We have an identification on the arrays, she said without leading up to it. Preliminary analysis matches the casing compound to a manufacturer in Eastern Europe with confirmed connections to a state-level intelligence service. This is not a freelance operation. Maya absorbed that without visible reaction, but Park saw something pass through her eyes, a rapid internal calculation, the kind that people who think in operational terms do when a variable changes, and the entire equation has to be reconstructed around it. That changes the timeline, Maya said. Significantly, Reyes confirmed. If this is state level, the arrays aren't the end of the collection. They're the beginning. They were mapping our network architecture in preparation for a more direct operation. When? That's what we don't know. Rex made a sound low and brief, not an alert, just the particular vocalization he used when he was processing a transition from one state to another. Maya looked down at him. He was looking up at her. He needs to eat, she said. Both of them. And then I need 30 minutes. Reyes looked at her for a moment. Take an hour. 30 minutes is enough. Take the hour, Callahan. That's an order. Something flickered across Maya's face that was almost amusement. Yes, Admiral. She found a quiet space with the dogs and she sat on the floor between them, her back against the wall. Rex on her left and Shadow pressed against her right side with the comfortable obliviousness of a dog who does not understand personal space and has never tried to. She fed them methodically and carefully, checking their paws and coats the way she always did after a field operation, looking for anything they couldn't tell her directly. Rex had a small cut on his right front pad from the rocky ground at the western perimeter. She cleaned it and wrapped it with the practiced speed of someone who had done it 100 times, and Rex held still for it with the dignified patience of a dog who trusted her completely. When she was done, she leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes. She did not sleep. She didn't try to. She just stopped for 30 seconds for a full minute and let the day press against her from the outside without pressing back. Burrow's hand across her face. The sound of it. She had not thought about it during the operation because operations didn't allow for that. They demanded every available piece of you, and she had given every available piece of herself to the work, as she always did. But in the stillness, in the 30-minute space, Admiral Reyes had ordered her to take. The memory surfaced the way physical memories do not, as thought, but as sensation. Rex turned his head and looked at her. She opened her eyes and looked back at him. "I'm all right," she told him quietly. He held her gaze for a moment, then put his chin on her knee, and they stayed like that, the woman and the dog, in the particular silence that belongs only to people and animals who have been through things together that they cannot fully explain to anyone else. Park found her there at 2:21:05 with 2 cups of coffee and the expression of a man who was trying to be useful without overstepping. He held out one of the cups. She took it. He sat on the floor across from her, his back against the opposite wall, which was not standard protocol for a lieutenant commander and a petty officer first class, but which was clearly the right thing to do in this particular moment, and he seemed to understand that. Shadow immediately crossed the space between them and sat in front of him, her tail moving. "She likes you," Maya said. "I think she likes the coffee. She can smell it, but she's not interested in it. She likes you." Park looked down at Shadow. "I'll take it," he said. They sat in silence for a moment that was not uncomfortable. "The JAG investigation is going to take months," Park said. "You know that." "Yes." "And Burroughs is going to have representation that will try to build a case around the operational context. The argument that a subordinate challenging command authority during an active threat briefing. I know what the argument will be," she said. "You're not worried about it." It was not quite a question. She answered it anyway. "I was doing my job," she said simply. "Rex was doing his. The results are documented. 2 arrays recovered, threat package neutralized, installation secured. Whatever argument his representation builds, it has to work against that." Park nodded slowly. Solis filed a formal witness account at 1900, detailed. Every word Burroughs said in sequence. She also noted the laughter from the junior personnel during the coffee comment with names. Maya looked at her coffee cup. "She didn't have to do that." "She said she did." He paused. "She also said she should have spoken up sooner, during the briefing, before it got to where it got." A long pause. "We all should have," Park said. Maya looked at him directly. "You're doing it again," she said. "Doing what?" "Apologizing for something you can't change." "Maybe I'm apologizing because I intend to change it going forward," he said. "And this is me declaring that intention." She considered him for a moment. Rex lifted his chin from her knee and looked at Park as if performing his own assessment. "Fair enough," she said. At 22:30 her radio crackered. Admiral Graydon's voice, personal channel, no relay. "Callahan, I need you in the operations center. We have a development." She was on her feet before he finished speaking. Rex in shadow with her coffee forgotten. Park was right behind her. The operations center was fully staffed when they arrived, every screen active, and the quality of the activity in the room was not the controlled urgency of a standard threat response. It was something quieter and more tense, the quality of people looking at something they don't fully understand, and trying very hard to understand it quickly. Graydon stood at the center display. He turned when she came in. 7 minutes ago, we received an encrypted transmission through a channel that should not exist, he said. It was routed through 3 dead-drop relay points, and it originated from an IP address that naval intelligence has flagged as belonging to the same state-level service connected to your arrays. He stepped aside so she could see the screen. On the display was a single line of text decoded from the encrypted transmission. It read, "The Shepherd knows. Pull your asset or we will." The room waited. Maya read it twice. Her face did not change. But Rex beside her made the sound he made when a scent he had been tracking for a long distance suddenly became very close. And Shadow on her right sat down, deliberately, precisely. The alert. Graydon looked at the dogs. Then he looked at Maya. "What are they telling you?" She looked at Shadow. She looked at the room. And then she said the thing that nobody in that room wanted to hear, but that every person in it had already started to feel. "They're not warning us," she said. "They're telling us that whoever placed those arrays is already inside this building." Nobody in that operations center spoke for 3 full seconds after Maya said it. 3 seconds is not a long time in ordinary life. In a room full of military intelligence professionals who have just been told that a state-level foreign asset is physically present inside their building, 3 seconds is an eternity. Admiral Graydon moved first. "Lock it down. Now. Nobody in, nobody out. Kill the exterior comm lines except the CNO channel and get me a full personnel roster for every person currently inside this building. I want names, clearance levels, and last known locations within the next 4 minutes." The room activated around him like a machine finding its rhythm. People moved to stations, voices went low and fast. Keyboards and radios and intercom systems all engaging simultaneously in the controlled, purposeful chaos of professionals executing a protocol they had trained for but never expected to use. Reyes was already beside Maya. "Talk to me. What are they reading?" Maya was watching Shadow. The dog had not moved from her seated alert position, her body oriented at a precise angle toward the corridor that fed into the operations center from the north access point. Rex was standing now, not forward, not aggressive, just standing at Maya's left side with every muscle held in a particular quality of readiness that was different from his field readiness. This was closer, more immediate. "Shadow's angle puts the source in the north corridor or somewhere along it," Maya said. "Rex is reading it as close. Within this building, not just within the perimeter." "How close?" "This floor," Maya said. "Maybe this wing." Reyes turned to the nearest tactical coordinator, who is currently in the north access corridor. The coordinator's hands moved fast across his terminal. 3 personnel logged through north access in the last 90 minutes. Senior Chief Petty Officer Daniels Logistics, Civilian Contractor Marin Holst Network Systems, and... He stopped. "And who?" Reyes said. The coordinator looked up. His face had the expression of someone who has just opened a door they cannot close again. "Master Chief Leon Burrows, Admiral. Logged through north access at 2203. The room went very still. Graydon turned from the main display slowly. "Burrows was escorted off this installation at 1600. "Yes, sir, he was." The coordinator's voice was careful. His access credentials were suspended at 1602. His physical escort cleared the main gate at 1618. A pause. His biometric logged through north access at 2203. Park said very quietly from the back of the room, "That's not possible. His credentials were suspended." "Unless someone reinstated them," Reyes said. "Or unless his credentials were never the ones being used," Maya said. Everyone looked at her. "State-level operation," she said. "They've had months of collection on this installation. Patrol patterns, network architecture, personnel schedules. If they were thorough enough to place 2 arrays in locations that specifically avoided primary sensor coverage, they were thorough enough to clone access credentials." She paused. Burroughs' credentials are high value to them. He's been running this facility for 11 years. His biometric profile is linked to access points that most personnel on this base never reach. Graydon said, "You're saying someone is using Burroughs' identity to move through this building?" "I'm saying that's one possibility." "What's the other?" She looked at him steadily. "That Burroughs was never just an inconvenient supervisor." The weight of that settled over the room like something physical. Graydon's voice dropped to a register that Park had not heard from him before. "Say that plainly, petty officer." "The operational intelligence required to place those arrays in the exact locations that exploited our coverage gaps required specific knowledge," she said. "Not general knowledge of naval installation security. Specific knowledge of this installation. Grid 7, Grid 9, the patrol timing on the eastern fence, the 4-minute communication dead zone on the Bravo approach." She paused. Burroughs designed the original sweep pattern. He knew every one of those gaps because he created them. The silence that followed was the kind that changes the shape of a room. Graydon turned to Reyes. His voice was entirely controlled and entirely cold. "Get me Burroughs' full financial record, his communication history for the last 18 months, and every access log associated with his credentials going back 2 years. And get me someone from counterintelligence on a secure line in the next 10 minutes. "Yes, sir." Park moved beside Maya. "If Burroughs is the source," he said quietly, "then his behavior toward you wasn't just arrogance." She looked at him. "He was trying to get you reassigned," Park said, working through it as he spoke. 3 weeks of deliberate harassment, the briefing confrontation publicly undermining your authority in front of the unit. If it had worked, if you'd been pulled from this TDY Shepard doesn't run on this installation. Those arrays complete their collection cycle. The operation succeeds." He paused. "He knew what you were. He knew what the dogs could do. He was trying to remove you before you found anything." Maya was quiet for a moment. Rex pressed against her side, warm and solid. "And when it didn't work," she said, "when I refused to leave, he escalated." The strike. A formal assault generates a report, an investigation, a personnel review. Any of those things handled through standard channels would have pulled me off the TDY for weeks while the administrative process ran. She paused. "He wasn't just being arrogant, he was running a calculation. He miscalculated. He didn't know about the 7 protocol," she said. "Nobody at this installation's access level knew about it. That was the variable he didn't account for." At 22:48, the North Access Corridor camera feed was pulled onto the main screen. The figure moving through it at 22:03 had been wearing a maintenance uniform with Burroughs' credentials on a standard ID clip. The face was partially obscured by a cap brim. The build was similar. The gait was close enough to pass a casual review. It would not have been close enough for anything more rigorous. It was not Burroughs. "Identify," Graydon said. The tech running facial recognition had a partial hit within 90 seconds, which was fast, which meant the profile was already in a database that did not require extensive processing time. He put the results on screen and said nothing because the results said everything. The partial identification linked to a diplomatic support personnel file. Low-level administrative, the kind of posting that generated no attention and allowed extraordinary access over time. The name attached was a cover identity. What was behind the cover identity was 3 layers of classification and the confirmed seal of a foreign intelligence service that the United States had been tracking actively for 4 years. Webb, who had been coordinating external communication from the far side of the room, crossed to Graydon in 6 fast steps. "We have a location," he said. Building security tracked the credential log. "North Corridor, Sub-Level Utility Access Junction 7. "Tactical team," Graydon said immediately. "Moving." Maya was already looking at the dogs. Shadow was on her feet, her body still oriented at the angle she had held since the moment in the operations center when she had first alerted. Rex had moved slightly forward, his weight shifted his attention absolute. "They're ready," she said. Graydon looked at her. He was a man who had sent people into dangerous situations for 4 decades, and he had learned over that time to read the quality of readiness in a person's face. What he saw in Maya Callahan's face was not bravado. It was not eagerness. It was the same thing he had seen in the very best operators he had ever worked with, a complete clean alignment between the person and the task. No gap between intention and action, no noise. "You go with the tactical team," he said. "Dogs lead. Park stays with you." "Yes, Admiral." Park caught up with her in the corridor. The tactical team was ahead of them, 4 people in the same matte black gear from the hangar, moving fast and quiet. Maya and the dogs moved with them as naturally as if they had trained together for years. Rex and Shadow slotting into the formation with an instinctive precision that made 2 of the tactical operators exchange a glance. Junction 7 was in the sub-level utility access, which meant pipes and conduits and close walls and low lighting and sound that traveled in unpredictable directions. Rex's nose worked continuously as they moved, reading the air in layers, sorting and cataloging with a biological processing speed that no instrument had ever successfully replicated. Shadow moved slightly behind and to the right, her role complementary covering the sensory angles, Rex's position left open. They were 40 meters from Junction 7 when Rex stopped. Not a sit. Not the formal alert. He stopped moving, and his head came up, and he looked at Maya with an expression that she had learned over 2 years of working with him meant something specific. Not a passive scent alert, an active presence. Something that was aware of them, too. She raised her fist. The tactical team stopped behind her. She turned to Park and touched her ear, then pointed forward and held up 2 fingers. 2 people. Ahead. Park relayed it without sound hand signals back to the team lead. The formation adjusted, spreading to cover the approach angles on the junction. Then a voice came from ahead of them from the direction of Junction 7, and it was not what any of them expected. It was Burroughs. "Callahan." His voice echoed oddly in the utility corridor. It was stripped of everything she had known it to carry: the authority, the contempt, the performed dominance. What was left was something raw and cornered. "I know you're there. I can hear the dogs." Nobody moved. "I want to talk," he said. "Before this goes any further, I want to talk." The tactical team lead looked at Maya. She looked back at him. He deferred to her with a small tilt of his head, which 24 hours ago would have been an impossible thing to imagine, and which now was simply the operational reality. She spoke. Her voice was level and carried clearly. "You're in a utility sub-level of a lockdown Tier 1 installation with a foreign intelligence asset and a tactical team 30 meters from your position, Master Chief. I'm not sure what you think talking is going to accomplish." A long pause. "I didn't know what they were going to do," he said. "When I fed them the patrol patterns, when I gave them the access architecture, I thought it was going to stay at the collection level. I didn't know they were going to—" His voice broke on the word and reassembled itself unevenly. "I didn't know they were going to put a person inside." "What did you think state-level intelligence collection was for?" she asked. Silence. "You gave them the gaps in the grid," she said. "You designed those gaps. You were running this facility for 11 years, and you made sure the coverage on the eastern fence and the western perimeter had specific exploitable blind spots. And then you provided the patrol timing that told them exactly when to use those blind spots." "I needed the money," he said. And those 4 words carried everything: the whole collapsing architecture of a person who had made one decision and then spent years building a life on top of it, and was now standing in a utility corridor, watching it come down. "And when the dogs came," she said, "and you understood what they could do, you tried to get rid of me." "Yes. And when that didn't work, you hit me in front of 40 people and generated a formal incident that you calculated would pull me from the TDY." "Yes." His voice was almost inaudible now. Park beside Maya had his hand on his radio. He was not transmitting. He was listening with the focused attention of someone who understands they are hearing something that will matter in a very serious room for a very long time. Leon. It was the first time she had used his name. It landed differently than she intended, or maybe exactly as she intended. "Where is the other person?" A pause. "Junction 8, South Branch." They told me to meet them here. I came to—" He stopped. "I came to tell them it was over. That whatever they'd planned to do, I wasn't going to help anymore." "And did you tell them that—" "I was about to." Rex made a sound low and brief and turned his head 45 degrees to the right. Shadow mirrored him. "South Branch." Maya looked at the tactical team lead and pointed right. He moved. 4 operators split from the formation and went fast and silent toward the south branch of Junction 8, and Maya went with them because the dogs went with her, and the dogs were the reason any of this was working. What happened in Junction 8 took 40 seconds. The foreign asset, the person who had moved through North Access at 2:03 on cloned credentials, and spent 40 minutes attempting to access a network node in the sub-level utility space, did not fight. He sat on the floor when the tactical team came through the junction door and put his hands on his knees and looked at Rex with an expression that was equal parts exhaustion and resignation. Rex sat 2 feet from him and looked back calm and steady, his amber eyes holding the man's gaze with a patience that had no bottom. The asset said something in a language that was not English, quietly not directed at anyone specifically. The tactical team lead had enough to understand it. Later in his report, he translated it as, "The dog found me 3 hours ago, and I have been waiting since then." Rex had alerted at 1900. During the 30 minutes, Maya had been sitting on the floor with her back against the wall and her eyes closed, and Rex's chin on her knee. Rex had already known. He had been telling her in the only way available to him with warmth and proximity, and the weight of his head on her boot, that he was there, that he had it, that she could rest for 30 minutes, because he was watching. She understood that when the tactical team lead told her. She stood in Junction 8 with the foreign asset being processed behind her, and she looked down at Rex, and she felt something move through her that did not have a clean name. Something that was gratitude, and grief, and profound love, all tangled together in the way things get tangled when you have been carrying them for a long time without acknowledging the weight. She crouched down. Rex walked into her arms with the total unself-conscious ease of a dog who has never doubted he was welcome there. She held him both arms around his neck, her face against the warm fur at the top of his head, and she said nothing because there was nothing adequate. Shadow pushed in from the side, demanding her portion of this, and Maya laughed one sharp, genuine breath of it and pulled Shadow in too, and for a moment in a utility corridor of a locked-down naval installation, she was just a 22-year-old woman holding her dogs. Park stood in the junction entrance and gave her that moment. At 100 Burroughs was in custody. The foreign asset was in a separate and more secure custody. The installation remained in lockdown, pending a full counterintelligence sweep that would take 72 hours and involve personnel from 3 separate agencies who arrived before dawn in vehicles with no markings. Admiral Graydon found Maya in the operations center at 0130, reviewing the preliminary counterintelligence report on a terminal in the far corner with Rex asleep under the chair and Shadow asleep on her boots. He sat down beside her, which was not something admirals typically did, and he looked at the screen she was looking at without speaking for a moment. "How are you holding up?" he asked. She looked at him. He had asked her something real the way Solis had and the way Park had, and she gave it the same honest consideration she had given them. "I'll be better when the sweep is complete and the installation is clear," she said. "That's an operational answer." "Yes, sir, it is." He accepted that. He was quiet for a moment. "What you did today, the sweep identification, the protocol activation, the grid correction, the asset location, all of it." He paused. "The program doesn't produce many people like you." "The program produces good dogs," she said. "The rest is just paying attention." Graydon looked at Rex under the chair. Rex opened one eye, registered the Admiral, and closed it again with the calm of an animal who had decided the threat level in the room was acceptable. "He's an extraordinary animal," Graydon said. "He's the best," she said simply. No qualification, no performance of modesty, just the statement clean and true. Graydon stood. He looked at her for a moment with the expression of a man choosing how to say something that exists at the edge of what institutional language can carry. "Burroughs spent 11 years building a reputation in this facility," he said. His name was on everything. Programs, protocols, training standards, all of it. He paused. By end of week, his name will be removed from every document, every roster, every wall it ever appeared on. That is what happens to people who betray this institution. Another pause longer. And what happens to people who protect it, Petty Officer Callahan, is that the institution remembers. Even when the record is classified. Even when the name can't be spoken in public. It remembers. He left. She watched him go. Shadow shifted on her boots. Rex, without opening his eyes, moved his chin from the floor to the side of her shoe, warm and present and certain. She turned back to the screen. She kept working. The counterintelligence sweep took 71 hours and 43 minutes. Maya knew the exact number because she was present for all of it, moving through the installation in rotating shifts with Rex and Shadow, walking sectors that the agency teams had already cleared electronically, because electronic clearance and what the dogs could tell her were two different things, and everyone involved had learned over the course of the previous 48 hours to understand the difference. They found nothing else. No third array. No additional personnel. No secondary collection point. The operation, as it had been designed, ended at the 2 points of failure that Rex and Shadow had identified, and the counterintelligence team lead, a woman named Chen, who had spent 17 years finding things that were not meant to be found, told Admiral Reyes that it was the cleanest and fastest interdiction of a state-level penetration operation she had seen in her entire career. Reyes relayed that to Maya on the morning of the third day. Maya said, "Tell her the dogs appreciate it." Reyes almost smiled. It was the closest thing to a smile Maya had seen from her in 3 days. The lockdown lifted at 600 on day 4. The base resumed its operational rhythm with the particular deliberateness of a place that has been shaken and is choosing consciously to reassemble itself correctly rather than just quickly. Personnel moved through corridors with a different quality of attention. Doors were held. Greetings were exchanged. Small things that had been easy to skip before were not being skipped now, as if everyone had arrived at the same quiet understanding that the texture of daily life inside an institution is not separate from its security. It is the same thing. Park found Maya in the K9 facility at 0730. She was running Rex through a standard maintenance assessment, methodical and unhurried checking. Everything she checked every morning, regardless of what the previous day had contained. She looked up when he came in. "You haven't slept," he said. "I slept 4 hours." "When?" "This morning. 0200 to 0600. He did not argue with the math, but his expression said something about it anyway. He sat on the bench along the near wall, which had become, without either of them acknowledging it, his default position when he came to find her here. "JAG completed the preliminary filing on Burroughs this morning," he said. "The charges are significant. Article 128 for the assault. Multiple counts under Article 106 for espionage-related activity. The counterintelligence findings extend the exposure considerably." He paused. "His attorney is already indicating a cooperation agreement in exchange for full disclosure of the asset network." "That's the right outcome," she said without looking up from Rex's left rear paw. "It means he likely avoids a full court-martial. It also means we learn everything he gave them and how long he was giving it." She set Rex's paw down and moved to the next one. 11 years of access, Park. Whatever he told them, however long he was telling them, the full picture is worth more than the punishment. Park watched her work. He had noticed over the last 3 days that she operated on a kind of ethical mathematics that was not cold, but was very clear, always choosing the calculation that produced the most useful result, rather than the most satisfying one. He found it clarifying to be around. It made him better at his own thinking. "The 2 junior enlisted who laughed during the coffee comment," she said. "What happened to them?" He blinked. "They received formal counseling, letters of reprimand in their service records." "That's enough," she said. "They were scared. People laugh when they're scared." "You're defending them." "I'm being accurate about them." She finally looked up. "There's a difference. Rex turned his head and looked at Park, with the patient, evaluative attention he had been directing at the lieutenant commander since the night in the utility corridor, as if he were running a continuous low-level assessment and updating his conclusions incrementally. Park had gotten used to it. He had also, without entirely meaning to, started talking to Rex directly on occasion, which Rex received with the dignified seriousness of a professional being consulted by a junior colleague. At 900, Commander Solis came to the K9 facility. She stood in the doorway for a moment before entering, which was not hesitation, but respect, the particular pause of someone who understands they are entering another person's space. "Can I come in?" "Yes, Commander." Solis came in and sat on the bench beside Park. Shadow crossed to her immediately, tail moving, and put her head in Solis's lap, with the democratic affection she had been directing at the commander since the afternoon of the first day, as if she had made an assessment and filed it permanently. Solis put her hand on Shadow's head. "I came to tell you something," she said, "and I want to say it directly." Maya waited. "I knew Burroughs was running a pattern on you from the first week," Solis said. "The task assignments, the public comments, the deliberate undermining. I recognized it. I have seen it before in units like this one, and I know what it looks like." She paused. "I should have intervened formally on day 3. I had the authority. I had the documentation. I made a calculation that managing it informally would be less disruptive to unit cohesion, and I was wrong. That calculation cost you." She looked at the bruise on Maya's cheekbone, which had moved through purple into the greenish yellow of the 4th day. "It cost you specifically." Maya held her gaze. "I am sorry," Solis said. "Not as a formality. I am genuinely sorry." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of something being received honestly. "I know you are," Maya said. "And I know why you made the calculation you made. You were wrong about the outcome, but the reasoning wasn't unreasonable." "That's generous." "It's accurate." Maya paused. "The question isn't whether you made a mistake. The question is what changes because of it." Solis looked at her for a long moment. "I've already drafted a new intervention protocol for the unit," she said. "Formal, with teeth. Any credible pattern of targeted harassment triggers an immediate command review, regardless of the relative ranks involved." She paused. "I'm also recommending it for installation-wide adoption." Shadow pushed her head more firmly into Solis's lap, demanding more attention with the unambiguous directness of a dog who does not do subtlety. Solis scratched behind her ears, and something in the commander's posture released slightly the particular softening that happened to people when an animal reminded them that they were allowed to feel things. At 1100, the message came. It came through Maya's personal secure channel, routed from a designation she recognized as the office of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, which was not an address she received messages from in the ordinary course of her work. She read it once, then read it again, then set her tablet down on the equipment case beside her, and was very still for a moment. Park noticed. "What is it?" She picked the tablet back up and held it out to him. He read it. His eyebrows moved in a way that was not quite deliberate. He read it again. "This is a direct assignment order," he said, "from the chairman's office." "Yes." "To a program designation I've never seen." "You wouldn't have," she said. "It's 3 classification levels above your current access." "It's a permanent posting," he said. "Not TDY, permanent." "Yes." He looked at her. "Do you know what the program is?" She was quiet for a moment. Rex came and pressed against her side, and she put her hand on his back without looking down. "I know what it is," she said. "I helped design part of it." Park absorbed that slowly, the way you absorb things that realign your understanding of a person you thought you had begun to figure out. He handed the tablet back. "When do you leave?" "The order says 72 hours. "Does it say where?" "No." He nodded. He was quiet. Outside the facility, the base had continued its resumed rhythm voices and vehicle engines, and the distant sound of an aircraft on approach. The ordinary music of a place that works, that functions, that holds itself together through the daily commitment of the people inside it. "I'm glad you were here," Park said. "I want you to know that. Not just for what you found, for what you are, the way you work, the way you think." He paused. "This unit is better for having had you in it even for 3 weeks. It's going to stay better. Because of what happened, and because of how you handled it." She looked at him for a moment. "You're a good officer, Park," she said. "Better than you were 3 days ago." "Is that a compliment? It's an observation. Take it however you want." He almost smiled. Shadow left Solus and came to sit in front of him, and looked up with an expression of absolute expectation. He scratched behind her ears without being asked. The next 72 hours moved with the particular quality of time that has a fixed endpoint. Maya finished every outstanding documentation requirement for the Shepherd program, filed her operational reports with the precision and completeness that she brought to all paperwork, because paperwork was the institutional memory of an operation, and institutional memory mattered. And she ran Rex and Shadow through their full assessment protocols each morning and evening, because routine was how she kept them steady and how she kept herself steady. Solus came back on the second day with the unit's full roster and spent 2 hours with Maya going through every K9 assessment protocol that the unit would need to maintain after she left. She took notes by hand, which Maya noticed and appreciated. Greer, the 26-year man who had tried to stop Burroughs and been too late, came on the third morning. He stood in the doorway of the K9 facility exactly as Solus had the same pause, the same quality of respect in it. "I wanted to say something before you left," he said. "Come in, Sergeant First Class." He came in and stood with his hands clasped in front of him, a big man trying to make himself less imposing, which Maya found genuinely touching. Rex went to him without being directed, which meant something about Greer that Maya filed alongside everything else she had learned about people in the last 3 weeks. "I've been in 26 years, he said. "I have made a lot of calculations about when to speak and when to stay quiet. Most of them were right. Some of them were wrong." He crouched down and let Rex smell the back of his hand. "The calculation I made in that hangar to stay quiet, to manage Burroughs informally, to decide that the cost of confronting him was higher than the cost of letting it continue." He paused. "That was one of the wrong ones." "I know," she said. "And I know it cost you something to come here and say that." He looked up at her. Rex had his head against Greer's hand, amber eyes half closed. "He's a good dog," Greer said. "He's the best there is," she said. On the morning of the 72nd hour, Maya loaded her gear with the efficient economy of someone who has moved often enough that packing carries no sentiment, only process. Rex and Shadow wore their transport harnesses. Shadow standing patiently while Maya checked the fit. Rex watching the door with the alert readiness of a dog who has understood from some signal too subtle for anyone else to read that they are going somewhere new. Park was at the departure point. He had not announced he would be there. He was simply there. Solus was there. Greer was there. 3 of the junior enlisted from the unit were there, standing in a loose, informal group with the slightly awkward posture of people who want to express something they haven't entirely worked out how to say. One of them, a young airman named Torres, who had been in the hangar on the first day and had not laughed at the coffee comment and had stared at the floor the whole time with the expression of someone who understood they were watching something wrong and did not know what to do about it, stepped forward when Maya came out. "Petty Officer Callahan," he said. His voice was young and a little unsteady with the effort of doing something formal that he hadn't done before. "I was in the hangar. I saw what happened. I didn't do anything." She looked at him. "I want you to know that I'm going to do something next time," he said. "Whatever next time looks like. I'm not going to stand there again." She held his gaze for a moment. Rex sat beside her, looking at Torres with calm amber patience. "Then what happened in that hangar produced one good thing directly," she said. "Hold on to that." He nodded once, the nod of someone receiving a thing they intend to keep. Shadow, incapable of tolerating a significant moment without participating, walked to Torres and pressed her nose firmly into his hand. He laughed surprised and scratched behind her ears, and his face in that moment was entirely 20 years old and entirely genuine. Park walked her to the transport. They did not say much because they had said the things that mattered in the 72 hours before this one, and what remained was the particular weight of an ending that has been handled correctly. If the program you're going to produce's results, he said, nobody will know it was you. That's the whole point of how it works, she said. I know. He paused. I just want you to know that I'll know, and Solis will know, and Greer, and Torres. He paused again. It won't be classified in this unit. Not what you are, not what you did. She looked at him for a moment. That's enough, she said simply. Rex stepped up into the transport and turned around and sat looking at her waiting. Shadow followed her nails clicking on the ramp, her tail moving in steady arcs. Maya went up the ramp and turned at the top. The morning was bright and the base spread out behind the small group of people who had come to see her off, and the ordinary sounds of the installation continued around them, unhurried, functional, alive. She raised her hand once in a brief, clean acknowledgement that was not quite a wave and not quite a salute, but held something of both. Then she turned and sat between her dogs, one hand on Rex, one hand on Shadow, and the transport ramp came up behind her. The investigation produced full disclosure. Burroughs's cooperation agreement laid bare 11 years of compromised intelligence, an asset network that spanned 4 installations, and a pattern of deliberately engineered operational gaps that had been providing a foreign intelligence service with a detailed and current picture of naval special warfare capabilities. The damage assessment ran to 600 classified pages. The remediation effort took 3 years. The name Maya Callahan did not appear in a single public document connected to any of it. The program she went to produced results that influenced operations on 4 continents in the 3 years that followed. Results that were classified at levels that most flag officers never reached. The dogs of Project Shepherd found things that electronic systems missed, stopped operations that would have cost lives, and moved through classified facilities across 2 hemispheres, with the quiet, certain competence of animals who understood their work completely. On a bulletin board in the K-9 facility at Naval Air Station Coronado, someone pinned a photograph. It was not a dramatic image. It showed a young woman with long dark hair sitting on a concrete floor, with a German Shepherd's chin on her knee, and a second dog pressed against her side, and she was looking at something outside the frame with an expression of complete, settled focus. Nobody official put it there. Nobody official took it down. Below it, written on a strip of plain white tape in someone's careful handwriting, were 4 words. She was always ready.